Okay, so then this section we are going to continue with solving for an unknown variable, but this time we're going to have problems are going to have fractions in them. So how do we clear fractions? That's what we're going to cover here. So we're going to take these nasty problems that have fractions and make it look like problems without fractions. All right, so the way that we do that, and there's multiple ways to do it, but I'm going to teach you a consistent way that will sometimes have bigger numbers, but once we get rolling, you'll see that I think it makes it easier. So what we're going to do is multiply every term, and every term means every term in the problem, by a common denominator of the fractions. Now, the easiest way from previous lessons to find a common denominator is just multiply all the denominators together. This works when there's 2 fractions. It'll work when there's 3 fractions. You can find a least common denominator, but just for the sake of what we're doing and less thinking, we're going to do just a common denominator. So you can see in this example, my common denominator of 3 and 2, if I multiply those two together, is 6. So within this problem, we have 3 terms. We have this one, and that one. So you can see how I'm multiplying them all by 6. And I'm going to show you a different way to do this as far as how you label them so that we save paper and time. So if I'm going to multiply a fraction by a whole number, I'm breaking out a basic calculator here. This is how we're going to do that. You multiply the whole number by the top number and then divide it by the bottom number. Because if I think of how to multiply fractions, you multiply straight across, right? So a 6 is really a 6 over 1 times a 2x over 3, but I'm gonna ignore that variable right now. So I do 6 times 2, which would be 12 over 3, and then 12 divided by 3, which would then give me my 4. But you can do it all in one step on a calculator. So here I would do 6 times 2 and then divided by 3 does our order of operations for us. That's where we get the 4, the 4x. Over here we have 6, and remember there's a 1 there. So 6 times 1 divided by 2, that's how I get my 3 here. And of course 6 times 7, we get the 42. All right, so now what we essentially did is we increased all of these terms by a factor of 6. And since we did it to everything, we're keeping it balanced still. So over here, now all I have to do is combine my like terms, and I'm back to the 2-step problem or 3-step problem, wherever we would be at. 4x and 3x are like terms, become 7x equals 42, and then you divide by 7 on these, which is what I showed in this step. And then we get our answer to be x equals 6. All right, so we're going to walk through these 3 examples. I'm going to show you how I would do them. Pause if I start going too fast. All right, so my first step with this, it's 3 nasty fractions. I have to solve for this lonely m over here, but I need to make a common denominator. So what I'm going to do is multiply these denominators together. That's what's going to help me clear my fractions. So 4 times 2 times 8 equals 64. So watch what I do here. I am going to multiply each of these terms by 64. Now instead of writing it out like this, where I put each one by 66 here or 64, I'm going to just make sure that I remember that I do it for every term inside of these. So I got to multiply by that, to multiply by that, and I have to multiply by that. Okay? I know if you're really good at this, you're like, oh, I just do it by multiply by 8. You can, but you'll still get the same answer. So I'm just showing you an easy way to make sure we are using a common denominator. All right, so now I'm going to go on my calculator. 64 times 1 divided by 4. 64 times 1 is just 64, and then divided by 4 gives me 16. So I'm going to change this right here to 16m. And I'm including that m because that's in the problem. All right, now over here, we're going to do 64 times 1 divided by 2. 64 times 1 divided by 2, that gives me 32. So I'm going to do plus 32 equals 64 times 5 divided by 8. 64 times 5 divided by 8 gives me 40. All right. So what I just did there was cleared the fraction. Now I just have to do my 2-step problem to solve for the variable. In this case, there are no like terms, so I'm going to go right to the subtraction part. We're going to undo that 32. We're getting rid of that by subtracting it. Subtract 32. So then I have 16m equals 8. Divide by 16. I'm running out of room here. Sorry about that. 8 over 16. I'm going to write it up here. So m equals, now I'm going to go to my Desmos calculator, right? Because I'm going to, well, I guess I could use it as a fraction, but a lot of times they're going to, since there's fractions in the problem, they want their answers in fraction form. So if I go right to my Desmos calculator and do 8 over 16, 8 over 16, or you can just do 8 divided by 16. It gives you 0.5, but we do that, and it's a reduced fraction as 1/2. So personally for me, when we're solving for a variable, if you're going to do 0.5, I'm not going to, yeah, I'll accept it. It's fine. I know you did the work. This is the part, clearing the fraction and then getting to the problem is kind of the legwork for it. So that's showing me you understand that concept. Okay, over here, again, we want to clear the fraction. So we need to find a common denominator of 3 and 8. So I'm just going to do 3 times 8. That gives me 24. So I'm going to multiply every term in this problem by 24. So that by 24, this one by 24, and this one by 24. So again, without rewriting it with it next to the problem in parentheses, do whatever is going to make sense to you. If you understand that if I put it out here and I'm multiplying by each one, if you want to write it above, again, that's up to you. So now we're going to go through the process of this times that divided by that. So 24 times 2 divided by 3, that gives me 16. So I'm going to write 16x. All right, over here, I could include this minus with the 5, or I could just know that my answer is going to be negative, so I'm going to kind of approach it that way, that I'm going to have a minus, and then right here, so 24 times 5, that's the numerator, divided by 8 gives me 15. So that's going to be a minus 15x, and that's going to equal, and then we have to do it to this other side, all right? Whatever you do on one side, you have to do on the other. So 24 times 26, that gives me 624. So I know it makes the numbers bigger, but it gets rid of those crazy fractions. Over here, you can see that I have like terms, so 16 and a negative 15, so I can add those together. 16 plus a negative 15, that's going to give me positive 1. So I have a 1x equals 624. I don't have to divide because my goal is to get x by itself, or the 1x by itself. So this is my final answer. All right, one more sample problem here. All right, go ahead and pause the video if you need to. You can try it yourself. I'm going to clear that out just so it's a little cleaner. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do it. So my common denominator here, I just multiplied the 5 and the 3 together. So that equals 15. So I'm multiplying this by 15, this by 15, and that by 15. So all of these 3 terms that you see here. All right, take out your trusty calculator. Let's work it through. 15 times 3 divided by 5. 15 times 3 divided by 5 equals 9. So that's this term right here. It's going to be 9x. Now I have to do 15 times a third. So 15 times 1 divided by 3, that gives me 5. So that's going to be negative 5. Equals 15 times 26 times 26. That gives me 390. All right, so then I go down here, no like terms, no distributing, so I am going to start undoing this problem. I need to get this 9x by itself, so I have to get rid of that negative 5. Let's add 5 to both sides. So that gives me 9x equals 395, so I'm adding those two together. So then my final step would be to divide by 9. So 395 divided by 9. That equals 43.888888 repeating. So x equals 43.8 repeating, or 0.89. Now, if we want to make that a fraction, what do? Let's go back to our trusty calculator here. What is 395 divided by 9? 395 divided by 9. It's just 395, but it doesn't reduce. So we could, theoretically, call it this, or x equals 395 divided by 9, either one. Now, again, if you're using your decimals calculator here, this is kind of the steps for like a basic one. So like 15 times 3 over 5 times 3/5. I did that times that divided by that. Now, if you are using your scientific calculator, your decimals calculator that has those options, you could still just use this to type it in. So you can still say 15 times, and then you're going to have to group that. So you say 3 over 5, and that will give you your 9 still. So however you want to use your calculator to do that, I find it quicker just to go 15 times 3 divided by 5 and do it all in one step in my calculator. You could type it in that way too, 15 times 3 divided by 5. This decimals calculator is going to do it out that way for you either way. So good luck with that. Clear the fraction and then do what you know how to do from there.